Lovely. So, Anshul, why don't you introduce yourself?
Cool. So I am Anshul. I've been in Clarisights for about uh, 2.5 years.
Okay.
Uh, so I did engineering, worked for a couple of months at a bank as a data scientist. So that was my role. I then went into doing like working with a couple of friends on a startup. That was like for a 6-7 month period, not working out too well. Uh,
Okay.
Looking for some jobs in the market. Clarisights was one of
Where
the
did you
companies,
study, if I may ask?
NID Trichy.
Okay.
So that's where I studied. Got a job in Bangalore. So I mean, usually everybody ends up in Bangalore in analytics or like
Yeah.
consulting after
Right.
college.
Okay.
That's the usual breakup. And yeah, I mean, I was just looking out for jobs. I initially I didn't know what kind of roles. I think the product manager role was a bit closer because I'd done some of the data analysis part. But I mean, I was interested in like building the product and all that. But I also felt that maybe I was not ready for it. Like
Mhm.
I had some experience working with a smaller team. Like we had hired a couple of developers and things like that. But was I interviewing in a bunch of companies. In all the other companies, it was like a PM or an APM role. At Clarisights, it was actually a solutions engineer role. So I didn't know what that meant. I didn't fully understand what Clarisights was actually doing as well at that point of time.
What
But
does Clarisights do, if you can just explain?
yeah. So Clarisights
Yeah.
is a reporting platform for marketers, right?
Okay.
Which means that uh, as an end user, as a marketer, you can just come in, log in, and start analyzing your data without like thinking about like SQL, joins, any of those parts. So we just
Okay.
get data from everywhere, abstracted in such a way so that the end business user can do this without relying on like a BI dashboard or anything. Like you don't need to rely on a business analytics unit. You can just come in, what kind of data you want to look at, you use it in the platform, right? So we are essentially just enabling marketers to do it. That's where we come in. And for us, it's more like we're building the infrastructure, so we bear the cost once, and then different marketing teams across the world can actually come in and start using it. It's very common that like the features that we build for one company translate into another because we're building very much focused in the domain of marketing.
Understood. And so it's like connect your Google Ads, connect your Facebook, connect
Yeah,
your.
yeah. That is one. So basically, you connect all your API sources.
Mhm.
In larger companies, you also have like your own internal data.
Mm.
So you have like because Google will tell you like you have 10 installs, Facebook will tell you you have 10. You actually look at it, you have like five.
Yeah.
And that so because like you have like your internal attribution data, you decide like okay, I have five, and then you'll break it down into how much is Google and Facebook get. So custom data sources, people also have like budgets, so
Mm.
that's where they make like strategic decisions. Okay, how much should I be spending in these channels? So you can actually mix all of the sources on Clarisights, set it
Mm.
up one click, it comes in. And like the part is that the data set will be like, like just one kind of large data set that you can just come in on the platform and just analyze. So
Understood.
connect it
And
and
your Clarisights basically makes sense of all of these disparate
yeah.
sources of data.
Yeah. So, it comes in multiple forms from different APIs. There are like limitations here and there. So I think that's where we kind of unify the data. So usually in a conventional setup, you would actually have like a data engineer or somebody who's connecting to a tool, like say
Yeah.
a Fivetran or like some sort of pipelining tool, and then you have somebody unifying the data, collecting it, ensuring it comes in, putting it in the warehouse, building the dashboards.
Oh,
So
it's a lot of work.
yeah, so
It's a lot of work for something that should just work. So I totally get the appeal of Clarisights. Every company I've been at has spent an inordinate amount of effort on these data pipelines.
yeah. So I think like one of the parts which we look for also is that how fast are we able to replicate their reports,
Mhm.
and that's like a sales cycle as well. We help customers replicate their reports on the platform, and then we just get them started.
So you started off as a solutions engineer.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
And how much
so
do
I
you
mean,
know about marketing at this point?
I didn't know anything. So I think the major criteria I was actually looking at across all the companies was like, one, how were the interviews, right? Like how was it happening? Were people like really interested? because it felt like a lot of case problems and all that were like just textbook, like okay, like you break it down, you break down the problem, and then you do a guesstimate and things like that. But I felt like interacting more. I mean, that was one of the decisions why I actually joined Clarisights. I just felt like, I mean, I felt like a positive rapport, like people actually cared about their work. It was a good conversation. So I didn't know about marketing. I probably didn't know well enough about the whole domain and space. But yeah, I mean, so probably started from scratch in the whole domain,
Mhm.
solutions engineering. And the company was also very much simpler back then. We
Mhm.
had just two teams, solutions engineering and engineering. So there is
Oh,
no product function, there is nothing else. So
okay.
we just work with the customers, get the, like, we usually do like pilots, which is like we have a sales cycle, like we replicate the reports, right? Get them on the platform, they become a customer, and we manage the accounts. So we get the requests, challenges, features, everything that's requested, work closely with engineering. That was where I had joined. That was the point.
Understood. So that's almost like what PMs do. They are close to the user and they kind of
Yeah.
figure out what to build next. But is
Yeah,
there another layer to this?
I think like you actually had to do a lot of things. Like, I mean, we personally had to set up companies, and like we were working with customers. Like I managed an account for a while, and I mean, it was like I probably didn't know how to speak to a customer. Like, and these are like enterprise customers. Like, what
Right.
kind of questions to ask? How do you communicate? Uh, and I think like it's also challenging because like it's these are like big customers. So the people that we work with are like Uber, like they expect like a very high quality of the product, and like because of the nature of the industry, there are places where things break, even because there is no problem like from our side, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
Google has a problem on their side, so we don't have data. So just having like, how do you have those difficult conversations and all that? So I think and like when we joined in, we probably did not have a lot of like engineering resources as well. So it was not like just about like okay, building the features and like okay, customers have asked for the feature, we build it. But we were doing a lot of prototyping as well, like
yeah.
giving the customers, building like some sort of like minimal, like maybe a script,
So
showing it to users.
who was leading this roadmap at that point? You said there was no product function.
Uh,
So whose idea would it be to do X, Y, Z instead of ABC?
so I mean, we probably have like some of the early customers where we build with. So I think it's like companies like Delivery Hero, About You. So it's largely like every quarter or every couple of months we go to them. We ask them, hey, like what are your business challenges? What are you trying to solve? How have things changed, right? And then we figure out, okay, where does the product fit in? Or the other part is that we usually like, I mean, when I joined, I think is probably the time when the funding was happening, and we closed a bunch of companies as well. So usually a new company comes in, and then we usually start from there. Okay, to make this company successful and use the platform, where do we go?
Hmm.
What are the parts that have to come in? And then we build it out. So it was organic in that sense. Like some of the like, so that's where I think like when we were building things, at least with the larger customers, what we noticed was that they were ahead as well.
Hmm.
Like they were able to find those problems, and they had actually worked with it before some of the like less advanced customers or the newer customers. So what we had built for them, we it used to just translate. Uh,
Okay. And do you still find customers having new interesting needs, or after so many, I
No,
don't know
no,
if you
definitely.
feel how
I
many?
think it's constant. So I think the part is that like at least with marketing, that like the whole landscape is continuously shifting.
Right.
So it seems like you have the same sources and everything is stable, but it's like just like privacy comes in and you lose all. Like so that is this particular thing called scan network. It's like basically iOS tells you that it makes it so that they ask you every time before tracking.
Yeah.
And most people would not allow that, right? So you
Right.
actually lose a lot of information just at that point. So it's like a scramble at that point across sources to actually figure out how do you account for this loss of information. Again, maybe another one is like automation, right? Coming in. Earlier, marketers probably had to go everywhere and make like the small decisions. Hey, what bid should I put here? What thing should I do?
Right.
Uh, I think ad platforms, what they're realizing is that it's easier to help people spend money if they reduce the friction. So they
Right.
just like just put your creatives in, and then we'll figure out what kind of audiences and things to serve these ads, right? uh,
Right.
so this part is constantly changing. Also, we are focused on like performance marketing right now,
Mm-hmm.
which is still one part of the big picture. Like there are more parts, so we expand. Like I think one of the parts that where we expanded was like CRM.
Mm-hmm.
We built one CRM integration, but then again we learn a lot of things, and there's a lot of like different type of use cases that come out.
Understood. So, what would you say are the kind of requirements for this role? What made you successful at it?
Um,
Mm.
sure. I think like one part is definitely like I think I mean like working closely with customers. I think at some like actually hands-on work. Like I think that really helps because I mean I feel like the other parts of like I mean like the rest of the things like prioritization, making decisions, and all that. Like the constant source of information is again like that working with customers
Yes,
part.
but you were not a trained product manager, so all
Yeah,
of this prioritization, decision
yeah,
making,
yeah,
where
yeah.
did where does that come from? First principles thinking.
Yeah. So maybe I think like and for me I think that probably helps because I don't have a lot of experience in this field as well. Like if we were to take a problem statement, so we actually kind of try to break it down. Like I mean that's probably
Let's take with an example. Like let's say
but,
an example. How does product management work at Clarisights now?
okay.
From problem
Maybe
countering to
yeah,
solution.
yeah. Okay, I can probably walk you through one or two scenarios. I think
Mm-hmm.
maybe one of the one, I can probably start with the one which I found the most challenging as well recently, what we're working on. So, uh, like basically the larger customers on the platform, so they kept saying that things are slow uh, because we just operate in a very large data volume. And like there's a lot of, I mean, usually the people like people describe all their tables as fat. Like
Mm-hmm.
we have like thousand like about 20,000 metrics, and like we have a lot of data, right? So
Sure.
it was basically there that like smaller companies everything loads fast, pretty snappy, good user experience, but speed was actually a friction point. uh,
Mm-hmm.
so that was I think one of the reasons why we built out the database that we have, we improved and all of that, right? So when I joined in or much before that, I think like the queries on the platform used to time out, which is probably like
Yeah, but this is not a product management thing, right? Make it
yeah,
faster
yeah.
is not a product management.
No, I know.
I'm guessing like engineering said, okay, like we need
I
foundation.
probably get to it. Like so, it was like things had improved quite a
Mhm,
bit,
mhm,
but we still continue to see there was friction
mhm.
with the users, right?
How did you see this? By talking to them or?
Yeah, so we do speak with them every quarter. We figure it out. We also speak individually to users, right? Um, so the part was that
Was
like
there any metrics or dashboards that said these are users are slow, these are slow?
yeah. So this is the part, right? So basically, earlier what we had was that like on the database side we had metrics.
Mhm,
On like probably the backend side we had metrics,
mhm,
but we didn't have like one sort of metric which actually measured the end-to-end experience that a customer waits for.
mhm,
So it seemed like everything was good, but
mhm,
like when we actually like so that was the shift. Like when we actually came in, it was a big friction point with the customers as well. That because we felt every team in the company felt that we've done much better. Like
mhm,
everything seems to be better. Like the P99 metrics that we are driving, everything is amazing, but
mhm.
customers are still complaining. Uh, so the metric, I think this is probably where the product part also comes in, right? Like the metric that you're optimizing for. You actually like we started looking at an end-to-end metric.
Mhm,
And then what we did is that we started looking at different parts of it, right? Like there is the database, there's the like what we were largely doing is that we were like just using the database like as a machine, getting it to be more and more and more efficient.
mhm.
So it was getting more efficient. But the thing was that okay, we started looking at the end-to-end times. It was probably like still like so the end-to-end times had a big delta between the numbers that we actually tracked. Then
And
we
where
looked
was
at
how
huh?
did you find the bottleneck? So there was a bottleneck somewhere else in the
Yeah, there
system.
is a bottleneck, right? And we don't know where it is. So then we started breaking the problem down. So we always heard that the data was big, but nobody actually had looked at the data. So that was one of the first things that we did. We actually started going through each of the data, going back and seeing like, does this scale really make sense? Like does like because what we were seeing is that some other systems were also able to keep up, but our tech was much advanced. So why were we like facing this gap, right? So then we went there, we actually found out that like probably like 70-80% of our data, at least one of for our larger customers, was actually redundant. So I mean, our database was much faster, but there were some bugs as well in the data that we had ingested into the platform, which actually bloated up this whole thing. So that
Okay.
was one thing. We actually went back, like we had to, like the main part was like we had to look at the whole, like the data actually comes in from a customer journey, right? There's a funnel of events. Like you see an ad, then you click on it, then you do an event and so on, right? So theoretically, there is a number, right, that we should possibly have. Like
Hmm.
what is the number of, like what is the number of rows, how much this data should be. What we realized was the number that we had was like crazy. Like it was
Hmm.
not, it did not make any sense. We never gone back and actually seen, like questioned whether this data was actually valuable, right? The other part which we realized was also that the database was pretty fast, but there were other parts and like within the back end and the front end and everything, which were slow. But this is again the engineering part, right?
Hmm.
So I mean, the one
No, this
part.
is interesting. No, this is interesting because you're a product manager and you got, or were you still a solutions engineer at the
No,
time?
this I was a product manager, and like basically the question was like,
If Clarisights expects its product managers to be like this, then that's a very technical role, I would say.
yeah, it is
Interesting.
on the technical side, but I mean ultimately it was also just breaking it down and seeing that what number should we hit, right? Like going
Hmm.
back to the customer, seeing that like what behaviors, like
Hmm.
because when you're querying a larger data set, you will wait for some time, but when you feel like you can actually take a data set outside of the platform and query it faster, you will tend to do that.
Yeah.
So I think both those parts, because like it seemed like more like, I mean, like I mean, we felt that customers had unrealistic expectations, and the customers felt like, that we are not able to deliver. So I think the first part of the project was more about creating like one sort of like target, right? Like what can we actually hit,
Hmm.
getting all the parties to agree, and then working backwards and hitting that. And then now the next part is that that's actually given us more freedom to actually go and work with customers even closer. Like then again, break down, understand their use cases, and work closer. So I think the main part is probably like again breaking the problem, seeing it from the customer side, like seeing also like one part which we do is that we try to see like if you were to do this outside of Clarisights, just using a spreadsheet, just using any other system, how would you do it?
Hmm.
Right? How would you do this whole approach? How does it work for a customer normally? And then we try to contrast and see like each problem statement. We go back and see like how does this make sense? Uh,
Interesting.
I
And
can, I can probably write it down a bit better and share it with you. Maybe after the call, I can share a few more examples.
like
But
case studies, no, that would be super helpful. Um, okay. And since you're hiring for this team, what would you be looking for in the candidate?
yeah. So I mean, I think there are a few things. I think like one part for us is like the depth, right? How deep can you go? Like from starting from the customer use case, and how deep can you go? I think there is some sort of technical understanding that is required. You don't need to be heavily technical, but like a data background, right? Like just being able to work with data, because day in and day out we are working with APIs, pulling the data and things like that. So that is one part. The second part is like being able to go ask questions, because like we work with large customers, and even the most advanced customers, like you have to keep clarifying, okay, what is it that you really want to do? Like what are you really trying to do here? Can you show it to us? Have you done it outside, right? So being able to really ask, clarify, dig deeper is one thing, for sure. And I think the experience with like at least being able to uh, work with data, and yeah, I think those are two things for sure. I mean, the other parts like working closely with the team and everything is there. But usually, like what we've seen is that people who are like, like very curious, who are trying to break things down, I think those people tend to do well here, because I mean, we actually, I mean, the part which we have is that like the product is like a whole stack, is what I feel. Like you have, like we control the visualization, we control like whatever the querying part, we control the database and everything, right? So then it's like we can potentially change everything. So I think finding that balance, what is that customer exactly trying to solve, where do we want to go, and then being able to work backwards with the engineering teams to help them provide this kind of context, right? Like to make the teams go faster. That's something that we're looking for.
And I suppose evaluating how this will break every other customer.
Yeah. So wait, could you clarify that? Like,
You build something for one customer and then you realize it's upset all the other customers because they were used to something being a particular way. And in order to build this, you had to change that thing. And now people are like, oh, come on.
yeah,
We like
yeah.
it better that way.
Yeah. So I think like the part is that, like, I mean, we have seen instances of that, right? So I think it's probably that if you very much like focus into that exactly what the customer is asking for, you tend to have a very like specialized solution. But I think there it's like, I mean, just important to like again zoom out, see like again which
Well, how
customer.
do you train and select for this skill, man? The systems thinking. What would you need to see in a candidate to be confident that they can think of like the whole system? And it's a big system. It runs marketing for, I guess, I don't know how many dozens, hundreds, and soon to be thousands of customers. It's a big system. So how would you assess the systems thinking skill?
So usually like, I mean, what we do is that I mean, like in the previous, so like when we hire like for the previous role, right? Like we've not been hiring a lot for product managers. It's again a
Mhm.
newer function here, right? But what we've been doing is that we hire for like customer success managers, right? And solutions engineers in the past. So what we usually try to do is that we give like a database like a problem statement based on data, like where it's a bit ambiguous, open ended, where people actually see and they actually work hands on with the data, see it, use it, actually join it, do those operations and figure out those insights. uh,
Mhm.
so that is something we have seen wherein, like, I mean, like people are actually able to see it, find you. I mean, one thing that we see is that we usually expect people, right, to come up with some sort of insights, like, okay, like the expected answer. But usually we also find people who challenge us and change, like give us some sort of insight that we never
The
uh,
best.
could think of, right? And then it kind of blows our mind. So I think that
Yeah.
uh, that is something that would be good for us, because it's just that like the problems like we have been working here for a while, right? Like we have some sort of
Yeah.
like biases and things like that, but you
Blind
constantly
spot.
need people to come in and challenge the ways
So
that we're
you're
doing.
saying essentially fluency with data,
Yeah,
like an
yeah. So I think
fluency is that,
fluency
and
with data, and yeah, I mean, maybe the systems thinking and the first principle thinking usually helps, because that is, we usually iterate to the problems, we come back to that, usually we just come back to that way of operation. That, I mean, that's how we're trying to do newer projects as well. And I guess, like, I mean, one part which is there is that we have a good working relationship with customers, so it's okay to ask those questions. Like we built a good relationship, right? So I think we just have to use it to the maximum potential. uh, yeah.
wonderful. Do you all write PRDs?
We do. So I can probably share a sample with you as well, but
I would
uh,
love. Could you just put it up on the screen?
um, sure, I can do that.
Whatever you can share, just to
Yeah.
get a sense for the depth and the level of writing and articulation and systems thinking. I think the way you'll put your PRDs together will be an important indicator of.
Okay. uh, can probably check after the call if I have better examples, but
Okay.
so this one is, I mean, one of the integrations that we work with. We saw that there is, so we do a lot of joining data sets abstracted for the user so that they don't have to do it, right?
Right.
And then we saw that there is a lot of maintenance effort in one of the joins. People are always asking questions. There's some configurations that need to be done. So we observed that one of the APIs provides a better way to do it. So we saw that, and then we were saying that, okay, can we see, like, okay, how is it done today? Um,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure if I I can probably go through all of the details. I don't know if
Just sense to get a sense of.
yeah, I can just walk you through like how we solve this problem, right?
No,
So
no, show me this. That's interesting.
okay, you
If you
you
can
you
try, of
see it?
course.
Okay, sure. So I mean we first see like okay what do we do today, right? Like what exactly are we doing? What kind of fields are we pulling in, right? How do we do the joins, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and then we obviously collect all the issues that we have, like again from a different bunch of sources. Like that's
Right.
the source, right? That's why this problem has come up. Like somebody should have asked for it. There
Oh,
is
so they
some
can, you can read the real customer report on
yeah.
to get context. Nice. Okay.
Yeah. So then we go now into the API, right? Like then we see, okay, we're using some API, something has actually changed. Because only if something has changed would we consider it, right? We go into it, we start seeing like what is the like basic thing which is changed, right? So this is just the overview, so that like people don't need to go through it. But then you actually see, you start with the benefits and all that. We do a lot of testing as well, right? Like in terms of like we have a hypothesis that it's actually going to do better joins, right? But unless you use the API and do the joins, you'll never know.
Hmm.
Uh, so we actually pull the data, we do the joins, we actually compare, we see what is the percentages. When we do some of these exercises, we also realize that it's not as good as people promise, and we go
Hmm.
back to the APIs. We ask
Hmm.
this. We find out, okay, there are problems in the APIs, there are problems in documentation and things like that. Usually we go and ask them, is it like a one-time problem, is it going to be fixed? Because you promise that things are going to be better, right? So we pull that. There's again like a lot of things because there's a lot of surface area, so we remove some of the things to just break it into a chunk that we can actually pick up. Then it's more about a few like implementation level details as well, like what kind of, like how do we construct these queries, how do we pull this information, how will this be visualized in a way that users can understand. So all of this information that we have, like it's just collected and present here, and we work with engineers beyond this to actually figure out how can we. By this time, I think we should have built up a case. Like we did, we had an initial hypothesis. We looked at the data. We actually saw that okay, it's good or bad, and then we have a case. Should we actually proceed with this or not? I mean, the person who did this actually pulled the data, tested it out. They ran some scripts on their side, like they figured it out what is happening, and then they built a proposal and they wrote down this doc, and then we took a call. So we decided not to go ahead with this after this exercise.
Okay. Oh, wonderful.
So it's a bit it's a bit painful, but what we actually learned is that we were learning about things happening in production. Like we do everything.
You know what they say, months of typing can save you days of thinking.
So it I
It's
mean
good
so
you have
like
figured out that it's not going to work as you were writing the documentation.
yeah,
And
yeah. So
but
I think
this
like
is a pretty detailed thing. So I'm seeing that like sweating the details is something that you all
yeah.
clearly value as a culture.
Yeah, because I mean I think it's just also because like what we have learned, like we actually just like it was not like this. There were no documents when we started off, right? And there's
Sure.
still definitely scope for improvement. But it was, I mean, a lot of things are that like we did it, we made the mistakes like a couple of times, burnt our fingers. Then we're like, maybe like it's okay. We don't need to start as soon as somebody gives a request. We don't need to start. We can spend some time thinking, breaking things down, figuring out what is happening, because like the main thing is that we work with third parties. Like the data is not ours. Like it's like many platforms, like if you see Amplitude, like different platforms that exist, they have a tracker or they generate the data, so a lot of
Correct.
things are in their control. For us, I mean, even though the stack is in our control, the data comes in from some source, right? So we just really need to think through, like, so this one is basically starting from the source, going through the whole system, and then figuring out like the different places and how things can be made better. So the problem statements are usually a bit simple. Like people will come and say that, okay, we want like more accurate joins. But then like just breaking it down into those details is, yeah, I mean, the scoping activity.
Very cool. And you all are on Notion mostly?
Yeah, we are on Notion. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Okay.
Okay. So, how involved do you get in sprints and stuff? Do you all do sprints?
We do. I think so. The model right now is more based on so we've been doing this for the last 6 months, but we start with some sort of objectives, right? And then like, okay, this quarter, like for example, the latency thing, we're going to bring it down. The end-to-end thing, we're going to bring it down to say 10 seconds. And then that's just the target, right? So then there is like some uh, we have like few teams coming in together, like maybe the database team, like the product engineering teams coming together and seeing what can be done. And then it's a bit open. Certain teams, like we have larger projects which I'm not sure if the like at a weekly level you actually see an impact. Maybe it's like 2 weeks or 3 weeks where you actually see the changes. But in terms of like the more customer facing parts, right? Like we have integrations and the product engineering team. We do work in like shorter sprints and cycles. So basically, we break it down. We break a quarter down into like two halves, and then we break down. Okay, what are the things that we're going to do in each half, and we break it down again. See at a weekly level how things are going, break it down, and yeah, distribute the tasks. So it's not perfect yet. We are still figuring out the rhythm here. But it's been like a lot of learning in terms of, because like when we started off earlier, we picked up a lot of items, then we started cutting down and cutting down and cutting down. So now it is in a better shape. But yeah, like now it's like we're just seeing like, okay, every week are we tracking back, are we completing things, and are we tracking back? So that is our mode of like planning and building things.
Yeah. I think you all are applying the same first principles thinking to the meta problem as well, which is good. All the frameworks are nice, but uh, I feel every company should build its own way of working for that particular context.
Yeah.
You can, of course, use the frameworks as a starting point, but you cannot just blindly adopt them and expect things to work.
Yeah. So I mean, I think like it's definitely something in iteration. I'm sure we'll have better ways to do it, but we have worked like completely in sprints as well, and then we don't know what is exactly happening. What did we do? Like, what did we do? Like 4 weeks we did sprints. Okay, we did like one item here. We completed, but what is the bigger picture here? So it just, I mean, at least I think. Especially for like such a broad product, right? Like the objectives really help. Like, what are we chasing? What are we going to get done this quarter? And then like once we have that clearly, you also have like a bit of freedom, right, for teams also to figure out, not like having everything spec down to the detail of, okay, this is how exactly we're going to do, this is the week, like how we're going to do it. So it's more like we have the goals, then we break it down, together with like engineering to figure out like how can we achieve it and keep changing things around.
Slick. And how big is the product function?
It's just me at this point, and
Okay.
we've had people, but like I mean, we are understaffed at this time. So we have like a designer who's just joined in. We used to work with an external designer, we still do, but so we have a designer who's getting onboarded. But yeah, so it's just me. There's a lot of support from the CS function as well to actually figure out what is happening. But I think like the CS team also has responsibilities of managing customers, right? So then like the proactive work of figuring things out, doing the scoping takes a bit of a back seat. That's
So does
that's
anyone who join the product org have to go through CS, like the rotation?
Yeah. I think, I mean, so this is something we were discussing with Arun as well. Like, how do we do that, right? Because it really helps. I mean, to make those decisions, to see like what is happening, how a customer is actually using the product, right? So what we usually do, we have some sort of like everybody who joins in usually does like the whole cycle for a customer, like
Mhm.
what they would do. But then you don't like work with like the pressure of an actual problem statement, like a live customer. So it would be, I mean, I think like somebody who joins in, we most likely will have them work in the CS like function, like obviously with guardrails, like not owning the whole relationship, because we have people. It's
Sure.
more about like just getting that understanding of how these customers operate, how
Visceral,
are we operating as.
visceral understanding.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's probably the best ways to learn, because there is a lot of documentation and everything, right? Like when I joined in, there was absolutely no documentation, and now there is a lot of documentation, but it doesn't like help you see that bigger picture. And like, because like the documentation exists, but like I mean, to understand the bigger picture, you have to actually do some of those things and then go back, read it, reflect, like
Of
that
course.
doing and reading loop
Of course.
is probably. I think that has worked for us in the past, so I think we'll continue to do that.
And are there any particular backgrounds that would stand out in an application?
You mean like for the people we're looking for?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I probably mentioned it like 5 times. I've mentioned the data part like 5 times, but
Yeah, apart from that.
that's what comes into my mind. I think uh, some sort of experience working with uh, like difficult or like I think the B2B setup is a bit tricky, right? Because you have a lot of customers, everybody has like is paying you a lot of money, and like you really need to. It's like everything makes sense. It's not like, I mean, the questions and the problems that people come with us, everything is sensible, right? But just that timing and figuring out the sequencing and all that. So it's not something that we look for specifically, but I think just having worked in some sort of a similar setup, it need not be in marketing. That's what I feel. Marketing obviously helps because there have been people who come with a marketing setup. It just helps them to ramp up faster.
Hmm.
So if you're curious, if you really like working with data, you can actually learn and figure it out. You don't need to be from the marketing place. But again, like if you have some experience working closely with customers, enterprise customers, that would
And with
be,
engineers, I suppose.
yeah, definitely with engineers as well.
So would a non-programmer be able to, maybe not, let's say programmer, but someone who's never programmed a computer in their life?
So I think like probably a solutions engineer is also a good sort of like an entry point into this, right? You work closely with customers. You probably are not building very large features, but then
Yeah.
you're trying to work on a pointed problem and try to solve it, but with like different stakeholders. Like you have a CS team and then you have like an engineering team. There are like different stakeholders to understand the requirements and build, right? So I think that is something which is close. Because usually solutions engineers are again in this sort of like B2B setup where you have an extent, like you have a product, it cannot meet all of the use cases, so you have to try to extend it in some
Right.
manner. So I think that is at least one area, and maybe somebody who has also worked in an analytical role but moved into like product.
Hmm.
uh, yeah, that those were the two buckets that came into our heads, but yeah.
Makes sense. Great. That's all the questions I have. Thanks for sharing all the info.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to stop recording now.
Okay.